Hello, I'm Deborah Evans with the Grapevine briefing from Lawyers in Local Government. It's the 6th of September and it seems that the government may have finally settled upon a plan for the reform of social care. While yet to be announced, the implications are positive and will be significant for local authorities across the land. Obviously, assuming the dispute over the funding of the reforms through a national insurance increase is resolved. For many, it's back to school this week, but what does the future hold? Well, are we facing a schools funding crisis? The Institute of Fiscal Studies is warning that expenditure on schools for 2022 to 23 is lower than it was in 2009. Undoubtedly, this puts pressure on budgets and the resources available for the support of vulnerable children and those needing extra help due to falling behind during lockdown. Also, unions warn that the lifting of the COVID restrictions will lead to a spike in cases, with risks of further school closures. And the new law expected on affordable school uniform has been delayed. Those of you facing freedom of information requests regarding exam grades set by teachers will be interested in the case of Agazi versus the Information Commissioner, which we covered in last week's bulletin, which upheld the right of the school to provide anonymised grades only and not to reveal grades awarded to other named students. Now, national news is dominated by Afghanistan, with the resettlement of Afghan refugees high on the agenda for a number of local authorities. But senior figures have warned that the national housing shortage, coupled with the fact that Afghans will require 4, 5 or even 6-bedroom properties due to the larger size of their families, may put further strain on the housing system. Only a third of councils have stepped up to help at present. Could the Home Office perhaps do more to network councils to make the right things happen? It's an unfolding picture, and LLG hopes to bring you a webinar on the latest proposals and lessons learned from previous resettlement schemes over the coming weeks. Whilst on the topic of housing, the government will announce shortly that Grenfell Tower will be demolished because of safety concerns. Experts have warned that the building poses a risk to the local community. This remains the greatest public sector tragedy of modern times, with concerns around governance, accountability, and the exposure of the apparently broken system of contractual liability associated with building contracts and health and safety. Have those governance lessons been learned? Well, for those of you with a focus on learning the lessons on governance, we have a conference well worth your time in attending. The LLG Governance Conference can be accessed both in person and online and includes respected experts Max Kaller and Joshua Rosenberg, input from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny and the LGA, alongside a myriad of eminent local authority and public sector speakers and legal experts to paint the picture of the future governance landscape. Now on to the new election bill, which is the centrepiece of emerging legislation with its controversial voter ID proposals. A recent report warns that the requirement for photo ID could be discriminatory, a bar to accessibility for up to 2 million elderly, disabled and minority groups, breaching human rights law. How could local authorities administer this in practice? Well, the weekly LLG bulletin will cover the debate as it unfolds in Parliament. Reports this week suggest that as lockdown restrictions have been lifted and COVID is no longer dominating resources and planning within local authorities, climate change is back on the agenda with force, and lawyers have a significant role to play in this. As the targets from the 6th climate change budget become law rather than just promises, there is a need for good governance of decision-making across your local authority to ensure legal compliance. And what does good governance of the path to net zero look like? Are the decisions being made in your local authority flying in the face of treaty obligations? For example, should you be moving ahead with major road building schemes? Durham Council, having declared a climate emergency, were called upon to reconsider plans to build relief roads after recognising that expanding the road network will do nothing to stem emissions. Whether it be heat networks, energy contracts, electric vehicles, or elimination of single-use plastics, there are a lot of tools to put on to your to-do list, and this essential knowledge is part of your skill base as a lawyer. Now, local authority planning lawyers have a lot on their plate from a climate change perspective. So of interest is the Cumbria coal mine planning inquiry that begins this week following Genric's earlier calling of the planning decision. Central to the debate is the further investment into fossil fuels, sitting entirely at odds with treaty obligations. If you want to learn more around the lawyer's role in stemming climate change, watch out for the free LLG Climate Change webinar series starting later this month. So you're up to date with the world of local government law, and we're back next week with another grapevine from LLG.